OK, wel, bore da. Croeso mawr I chi gyd i'r newydd, i'r Neuadd Dewi Sant ac I Gaerdydd ac wrth gwrs I Gymru. Good morning. Welcome to you all. It's a great pleasure to be here at the AGM and the conference. It does seem a very long time ago now since I used to make the annual pilgrimage to Bridlington, where we would meet every year in the 1980s to attend the Napo AGM. And yet, thinking about coming here this morning, it still seems to me that 10 years into enforced austerity, the preoccupations of the 1980s have an uncannily and sadly familiar ring. An acute shortage of affordable housing, the impact of deliberately created poverty in the lives of families and whole communities, a court system where the arc bends so indifferently towards justice, and that especially, of course, for women or black people. That list will be, I know, familiar to many people in the hall here today. The challenges are real, and they are present in too many lives here in Wales and across the United Kingdom. Now, as you will know, criminal justice is not a devolved responsibility in Wales. Nearly a quarter of a century ago, in 1995, I remember being sent by Napo to give evidence to the Labour Party Commission, which was set up to prepare for devolution under what we all hoped would be the next Labour government. Now, I was sent to that commission to argue for probation being included in the very first tranche of services to be devolved to Wales. 25 years later, I'm here to make the same case today. And the case I made then is in essence the same. Everything a probation officer needs to do her or his work effectively turns out to be a service that is already devolved. If you're looking for somewhere to live, then housing is devolved in Wales. If you are looking for a mental health service or a substance misuse service, then health and substance misuse services are devolved in Wales. If you're looking for a training course or an employment opportunity for someone, then those services are already in the hands of the National Assembly for Wales. The things that probation officers depend upon to do the work they do as a broker between the individual and the services which can make such a difference in their lives are already devolved here in Wales. And that case means that the devolution of the probation service would complete a suite of responsibilities that would allow the discharge of the important things that probation has to do to be made more effectively here in Wales. Now, of course, the probation service today is not the same service as it was back then. So I want to sketch briefly for you the sorts of ambitions which I believe a Welsh Government would have for a devolved probation service here in Wales, were we to succeed in our ambition to bring the probation service within that devolved family. And here are just 5 key ambitions which we would have for a probation service in the hands of the National Assembly and of the Welsh Government. The first and the most fundamental thing is to say that we would unambiguously wish to see a probation service as a fully public service, run on the basis of public interest, not a service in which profit plays any part. It would be a fundamental matter for us of political and ethical belief that the extraction of profit from human misery plays no part in the way we organise public services here in Wales. We have no private services in our health service. We have a fully public education service. We would wish to see the probation service here in Wales part of the same public service family. Now, if we succeeded in that, then what would the primary purposes of a devolved probation service be? Well, for us, it would include an emphasis on prevention, an emphasis on diversion, and an emphasis on de-escalation. The court system operates not as a ladder, as I remember being told when I was training to be a probation officer all those years ago. It operates as an escalator in which once someone is put on the step into the system, it drags them more and more into its jaws. We need powerful and purposeful ways of de-escalating the impact of the criminal justice system in the lives of individuals. And the probation service, in a devolved context, would be a powerful player in that de-escalation movement. We have succeeded hugely in Wales in employing exactly that principle in our youth justice services. Far fewer young people drawn into the youth justice service, and when young people are so drawn in, then always our ambition to intervene in the least intrusive way possible at the lowest level of intervention. And a probation service in a devolved context would, I believe, be firmly positioned in that way. Thirdly, we would look to see a probation service rooted in community and locality. A probation service that is not trapped in central and city offices. A probation service that operates out there in the communities in which it is most significant. A service attuned to the causes as well as the consequences of crime. I was reminded sitting there and hearing Northumberland call out on the register of a document that was published by the Northumbria Probation Service way back in 1990 called The Dog That Did Not Bark. And the dog that did not bark was a description of the probation service in the so-called riots that broke out across cities in the United Kingdom at the very end of the 1980s, including here in Cardiff. And the question in the report was, written by the Northumbria Probation Service, why the probation service wasn't alert to and warning about the signs of social distress in those communities that gave rise to the distress that spread in many parts of the United Kingdom. I want a probation service, if it is devolved to Wales, to be out there in those communities, to be walking those streets, to be hearing from people on the ground, to be working with other services at that community level, to be part of the efforts we make here in Wales to create a more equal society in which the causes that create crime are at the forefront of our mind, as well as having to deal with the consequences of it. Now, that brings me to my fourth characteristic then, that a devolved probation service would be prominent in the partnerships on which effective practice is founded. We're fortunate here in Wales. I don't say this in any sense of wanting to suggest there are lessons for anybody else. We're fortunate in terms of scale. We're a country of 3 million people. We have 22 local authorities. We have only 7 local health boards. When we see a problem that requires a contribution from a range of services to make an effective response, then we can generally all get in the same room together in order to help to fashion those responses. And an effective probation service in Wales would be a key player in those partnerships that bring public services together. that regard the wall between public services as permeable, so that we are able to mobilise money, resources, energy across boundaries in order to put resources into places where they are needed, to be imaginative in the types of solutions that we are able to bring about. And the Probation Service, in those community-based solutions that we try to bring about, would, for me, be a prominent partner in the way that we try to do things here in Wales. And finally, to say that in this very brief description of the ambitions we would have for a devolved probation service, then we would want to see a probation service staffed by people who are well trained, confident in their possession of relevant knowledge, but rooted as well in a strong ethical sense and supported by an organisational culture which places real value on professional autonomy and the ability to respond directly to the unique human conditions in which probation staff operate. And that sense of a group of well-trained but capable individuals, able to exercise professional judgment, able to respond to the human person in front of you, but also to be able to navigate a path through the complexities of the circumstances which that individual finds themselves in, would be, for us, a key to the sort of probation service we want to see. Now, we're not at that happy moment yet. We continue to make the case for the devolution of probation. But in the meantime, we have to operate in the world as we have it today. And here are some of the things that we as a Welsh Government are involved in the current circumstances. First of all, we continue to resist efforts to build additional prison places here in Wales. Now, to be clear, this is not about not being willing to see replacement places for those crumbling and entirely inadequate prisons in which people in Wales find themselves housed. But the very last thing we think we need are additional prison places. We want to see fewer people in prison, not more. And the iron law, as you know, of social welfare is if you build more places, they will be filled. And we don't want to see that here in Wales. We go on hoping that we can press ahead with blueprints for youth justice and women offending, which we agreed with Rory Stewart when he was at the Ministry of Justice. And we think, compared to many of the things we've had to endure over the last 10 years, have a progressive set of possibilities for us in Wales. Whether that will be possible, whether the merry-go-round of ever-changing ministers at Whitehall will allow us to move ahead in the way that we had agreed and planned, it's hard to have complete confidence. But we hope to be able to do that because we think there are genuine possibilities in the blueprints that we have agreed. We've welcomed the Welsh model for probation announced earlier this year, meant to be in place by the end of this year, and which reverses some of the worst wrong turns of recent times. We want to continue to work alongside others, alongside the National Association of Probation Officers, of course, to try to make sure that we make the most of whatever opportunities we can find there, albeit in our thinking as an interim position before we get to full devolution and an ability to do things in the way that we would think would be right for Wales. And finally, in a way that maybe not many people in the hall will know, we have something called the Thomas Commission. Lord Justice Thomas, former Lord Chief Justice, is chairing a commission for us here in Wales, due to report very soon, later this month, and looking at the wider arguments for devolution of criminal justice services here in Wales. Not simply youth justice and probation, but police, courts, administration of justice, prisons, the whole basket of things that goes with responsibility for criminal justice. And we look forward to the report of the Thomas Commission and to it offering us some sense of a roadmap for devolution on the wider stage of criminal justice. Let me end, though, this morning, before you get into the serious business of the AGM, by thanking all of those who are involved in the probation service here in Wales, and especially those representatives of the National Association for the strong, consistent and constructive relationships we have sustained here in Wales through all the vicissitudes of the devolution era. The National Assembly itself has more than a Barnet share of members whose own histories are bound up with the probation service, and any development in probation is always debated and discussed on the floor of the National Assembly. I hope that before very long at all, those debates will be about how we re-establish a probation service here in Wales, a probation service true to its founding values, equipped to operate in contemporary conditions, and liberated to make its full contribution to the sort of society we want to see here in Wales. A society where economic justice, social justice, and environmental justice form the basis for the sort of criminal justice that we would want to see here in Wales, in which a revived and devolved probation service would have such an important part to play. I look forward to hearing about your deliberations here in Wales and to working closely with you as we move this agenda forward. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you all very much indeed.